Breaking Bad is full of terrifying villains, from Tuco Salamanca beating a man to death over saying the wrong thing, to Gus Fring calmly promising to murder a man's wife, son, and infant daughter, to Todd Alquist shooting a kid and writing it off as a bad day at work. In this video, I'm going to show you how Breaking Bad built the most terrifying villain on television by first teaching you every other kind of fear the show has to offer, starting with the one that hits the hardest and burns out the fastest. Tuco Salamanca is the kind of villain most TV shows would build their entire run around. He's the classic scary guy, the one who could kill you over literally nothing. A wrong look, a wrong joke, or even just being near him when he's having a bad day. Every second he's on screen, you're waiting for the conversation to turn into a murder. And the show uses him on purpose as the starting point for what fear looks like in this world. The clearest proof shows up in Breaking Bad Season 2, Episode 1. Tuco has already beaten No-Doz at a deal meeting just because he didn't like something the guy said, and now No-Doz is dead from that beating. Not because he betrayed anyone, not because he stole money or talked to the feds. He just opened his mouth at the wrong time, and Tuco couldn't stop swinging. Walt and Jesse are standing right there watching this happen. And you can see the exact moment they both realized that working with this man could get them killed over absolutely nothing. Better Call Saul actually introduces Tuco even earlier in the timeline. Jimmy McGill gets dragged in front of him after a scam goes sideways, and Jimmy somehow manages to talk Tuco out of killing 2 kids on the spot. But what does winning with Tuco actually look like? You beg for their lives as hard as you can, and the best deal you get is Tuco agreeing to only break both their legs. That's the absolute ceiling when you're bargaining with a guy who treats murder like a first instinct. And the whole Salamanca family tree shows you exactly where that instinct gets learned. Back in Season 3 of Breaking Bad, there's a flashback where Hector Salamanca grabs his own young nephew Marco and holds him underwater to teach the cousins that family loyalty is more important than anything, including a kid's life. La familia es todo. That's the family motto. And Tuco, the cousins, and Lalo all came out of that same house, where the line between love and violence basically didn't exist. The cousins' attack on Hank later that same season is the perfect example of how deep that training goes. Hank gets an anonymous call telling him 2 men are coming to kill him, and he has 1 minute. The cousins are already on their way.
In your car. You have 1 minute.
And I'll get the gag.
And during the fight, Marco actually puts his gun away and pulls out an axe because a bullet felt too quick and too easy. He wanted Hank to feel every second of it. That single decision to drag it out is the only reason Hank survives long enough to grab a loose round and kill him. So here's what Tuco and the Salamanca soldiers actually teach you about this show. They're pure chaos, you can't predict them, you can't reason with them, and you definitely can't relax around them. But this kind of fear has a hard ceiling. You know Tuco is dangerous the second he walks into a room. His whole energy screams it, which means if you can stay out of his way, you live. The show knew that, which is exactly why Tuco only lasts a handful of episodes before Hank takes him out in a shootout. He was never meant to be the final villain. He's the opening lesson, and the franchise needed you to learn it first so that every villain who comes after him can scare you in a way that Tuco never could. But here's the thing about Tuco's kind of scary. It burns out fast. Once you know what to look for, you can at least try to keep your distance. And that's exactly why the show needed to create a villain whose whole deal is that you'd never see him coming, even if you ate at his restaurant every single week. Gus Fring is the opposite of Tuco in almost every way. Where Tuco runs on rage, Gus doesn't seem to feel anything at all. Where Tuco shows you how dangerous he is the moment you meet him, Gus makes you feel completely safe right up until the second he decides you're done. And the gap between those two approaches to fear is exactly what makes Gus so much harder to deal with. The show reveals what Gus is really like in layers, and each one is worse than the last. In Better Call Saul Season 4, Episode 2, Gus suffocates one of his own men, Arturo, with a plastic bag, while Nacho Varga is forced to stand there and watch. And then, right after killing a man in front of him, Gus looks at Nacho and says 2 words, "You are mine." He's not yelling or threatening or even raising his voice, just letting Nacho know how things work now. The same way you'd tell someone what time a meeting starts. Nacho has a father Gus can threaten, and that gives Gus everything he needs. From that moment on, Nacho works for Gus whether he wants to or not, and the only reason he's still breathing is because Gus hasn't finished using him yet. But the cartel poisoning scene might be the single best example of how far Gus is willing to go when he has a plan. In Breaking Bad Season 4, Episode 10, Gus walks into Don Eladio's hacienda with a bottle of poisoned tequila and shares a drink with the entire cartel leadership. He actually swallows the poison himself, just to keep the cover going. While the cartel bosses around him start collapsing and dying, Gus is already on schedule. He'd already planned for the vomiting and the recovery time, every last detail accounted for before he even walked through the door. He turned a toast into a mass killing and never once looked like a man who wasn't in full control. And the thing that makes this so much more than just a cool scene is that you realize Gus has been waiting to do this for years. Ever since Hector Salamanca shot his partner Max right in front of him on Don Eladio's orders, Gus has been building toward this exact moment.
Yo lo necesito. Él es mi compañero. Por favor, se lo...
He never lashed out or rushed it. Instead, he spent decades putting together a cover identity, a restaurant chain, a drug empire, and an underground lab, just so he could walk into that room and pour one drink. And then there's the moment where Gus drops the mask completely. After Walt causes too many problems, Gus takes him out to the desert and tells him, with no emotion in his voice at all, "I will kill your wife, I will kill your son, I will kill your infant daughter." He's not bluffing or negotiating or trying to scare Walt into making a deal. He's telling Walt what happens next if Walt doesn't fall in line. Better Call Saul actually makes this threat even scarier looking back because it shows you how much planning and watching goes on behind the scenes of Gus's entire operation. The underground lab construction, the security teams, the years he spent managing Nacho and fighting the Salamancas before Breaking Bad even starts, all of it runs like a company. And that's the key thing about Gus. His whole system depends on control. He watches everything, prepares for everything, and only acts when the plan is ready. With Tuco, the fear is he might snap right now. With Gus, the fear is way worse. It's the slow realization that he already decided what's going to happen to you 3 weeks ago, and you just haven't been told yet. But Gus has a weakness the show eventually uses to bring him down. His entire system depends on nobody getting close enough to see what's behind the mask. Everything works as long as he's the smartest, most prepared person in the room. And before Walt ever figures out how to destroy Gus from the inside, someone else gets there first. Someone who cracks Gus's defenses in a way nobody else on this show ever could. And what happens when that guy shows up doesn't just raise the bar for how scary this franchise can get. It completely changes the rules of what a villain in this world is even allowed to be. Lalo Salamanca is the villain that even Gus Fring is afraid of. And once you understand why, you'll realize why he changes everything about how this franchise builds its threats. Every villain we've talked about so far follows a pattern you can put your finger on. Tuco is scary because he's loud and violent. Gus is scary because he's quiet and planned out. You can at least sort those guys into a box. You know what kind of danger you're in. Lalo breaks that completely because he can be both of those things at the same time, and he switches between them so fast that you never know which version of him you're talking to. He walks into scenes smiling, cracking jokes, cooking food for people, and acting like everybody's best friend. And then he kills someone without the smile ever leaving his face. The first time the show really lets you see what Lalo is capable of, it's almost easy to miss. He's tracking down information connected to Gus's secret construction project, and his investigation leads him to a travel wire office. The clerk behind the desk, a guy named Fred Whalen, is just doing his job, and Lalo kills him. No warning, no build-up, no dramatic speech beforehand. Fred has zero connection to the drug world, and Lalo ends his life like it's just another step on a longer to-do list. But the scene that really defines Lalo as a villain happens in Better Call Saul Season 5, Episode 9. Lalo shows up at Jimmy and Kim's apartment because he thinks Jimmy is lying about what happened during the desert bail run, and instead of threatening them or pulling a weapon, Lalo just sits down and starts asking questions. He's friendly, he's making conversation, and then he locks eyes with Jimmy and says, "Tell me." Again. 3 words, and the entire room changes. Jimmy and Kim are sitting in their own living room, and all of a sudden it feels like they're trapped in a cell. Kim actually manages to push back and redirect Lalo's attention, and it works in that moment, but the show makes it very clear that surviving one conversation with Lalo doesn't mean anything. He's always watching, always circling, always putting pieces together. The worst thing Lalo ever does proves exactly that. In Better Call Saul Season 6, Episode 7, Lalo has been hunting Gus's secret operation for weeks. By this point, he's already survived a full assassination attempt at his compound, killed the hit squad Gus sent after him, forced the last surviving attacker to call in and report the mission as a success, and then disappeared completely. Jimmy still believes Lalo is dead, but Gus and Mike know better, and even Kim has been warned. The only person who doesn't see it coming is the one who matters most. Lalo walks into Jimmy and Kim's apartment during a completely unrelated argument they're having with their colleague Howard Hamlin. Howard is standing there in the middle of a personal fight that has absolutely nothing to do with drugs or cartels or anything dangerous. And Lalo shoots Howard in the head, mid-sentence, then looks at Jimmy and Kim and says, "Okay, let's talk." Howard had no idea who Lalo was. He had no connection to any of this. He just walked into the wrong room at the wrong time, and that was the end of his life. And that's what separates Lalo from every other villain in this franchise. His charm isn't a performance the way Gus's friendliness is. Gus puts on a warm public face as a strategy, and if you look closely enough, you can tell it's not real. But Lalo actually seems to enjoy people. He's funny, he's easy to like, and he's the kind of guy you'd want at your dinner table. That makes everything he does so much harder to process, because the same man who just made you laugh will kill somebody 2 minutes later without his mood changing at all. Gus spent years building a cover identity to hide what he was. Lalo doesn't need one because the charm and the violence are both completely real, living in the same person without any conflict between them. That's why Gus is so scared of him. Gus can handle threats he can plan for and predict. Walt eventually destroys Gus too, but Walt does it by turning Gus's own enemies against him. Lalo does something scarier. He cracks Gus's physical defenses, finds the super lab, and survives everything Gus throws at him while still pushing forward. But Lalo, Gus, and Tuco all share something important. When they hurt people, there's always a reason behind it. Revenge, power, family, protection. It might be a terrible reason, but it's a reason you can point to and understand.
Nobody moves Crystal in the South Valley but me, bitch!
The show still had one more type of villain left to build, and this one is way harder to watch than any of them because when he does something awful, there's no motive behind his eyes at all. There's just nothing. Todd Alquist is the only villain in this entire franchise who makes you uncomfortable without ever raising his voice, making a threat, or showing any kind of anger. Every other villain on this list has a moment where they show you who they really are. A snap, a plan, a cold promise. Todd never has that moment. And it's not because he's hiding something underneath the surface. It's because there is no surface. He just does horrible things with the same energy someone else would use to take out the trash. The first time the show lets you see this is in Breaking Bad Season 5, Episode 5. Walt, Jesse, and Todd have just pulled off an unbelievable train robbery, stealing methylamine without anyone knowing it happened. It's a perfect job. Nobody got hurt, nothing went wrong, and they're about to walk away clean. Then a kid shows up, Drew Sharp, a boy on a dirt bike who happened to be riding near the tracks and saw them standing there. Todd looks at the kid, gives him a little wave, and shoots him dead. Just like that. A child is gone because Todd decided that a witness is a problem you solve right away, the same way you'd patch a leak or change a tire. And in the very next episode, when the group is dealing with the fallout of what just happened, Todd's take on the whole thing is 5 words. Man, shit happens, huh? He's not trying to defend what he did or work through any guilt about it. He seems to honestly think that killing a kid is just one of those things that comes with the job, like staying late or filling out paperwork.
Shit happens, huh?
And it only gets worse from there. Later in Season 5, Todd is part of Jack Welker's gang when they capture Jesse and force him to cook meth while chained up in a cage. Jesse tries to escape, and the punishment Todd comes up with is stomach-turning in how carefully he picks it. He goes to Andrea Cantillo's house, the woman Jesse cares about, and knocks on her door. When she opens it, he's polite, acting like a neighbor stopping by. And then he shoots her on her own front porch while Jesse is locked in a vehicle nearby, forced to watch. Todd doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't celebrate. He kills her and walks away like he just dropped off a package. And the message to Jesse is obvious. If you try to run again, her son Brock is next. El Camino makes all of this even worse by filling in a piece of the story Breaking Bad didn't have time to show. In a flashback, Todd pulls Jesse out of his cage, and for a second you think something terrible is about to happen. But Todd isn't there to hurt him. He just needs help with something. Todd killed his housekeeper, a woman named Sonia, because she found his hidden cash while cleaning, and now he needs somebody to help get rid of the body. He drives Jesse out to the desert, has him help with everything, and treats the whole thing like they're running weekend errands together. He's making small talk while Jesse is standing over a dead woman. Todd doesn't feel bad about it. He doesn't feel good about it either. He feels nothing at all, and that gap between what he's doing and how he's acting is exactly what makes him the hardest villain in this franchise to sit through.
Todd,
Opie, dead-eyed piece of shit pulls out a gun and shoots the kid.
This is Todd L.
Because here's what Todd actually represents in the way this show builds its villains. Every other threat we've covered runs on something real. Tuco runs on rage, Gus runs on revenge, and Lalo runs on ambition mixed with family loyalty. You can look at any of those guys and understand what's driving them. Todd has no engine. There's no anger toward Drew Sharp, no point being made by killing Andrea, no grudge against Sonia for something she did. He just sees a situation where someone needs to die to keep things running smoothly, and he takes care of it the way you'd handle a chore. The show puts polite words in his mouth and relaxed body language on his face, while he commits acts that would destroy every other character in this franchise. That gap between what Todd does and how Todd acts is what makes him feel so deeply wrong. Tuco scares you because you know he'll explode. Gus scares you because you know he's already 10 steps ahead. Todd scares you because you look at his face while he's doing the worst things you've ever seen on this show, and there's just nothing there to read at all. But even Todd, as deeply disturbing as he is, still feels like someone from outside your life. And honestly, that's true of every single villain we've covered so far. They're cartel soldiers and gang members, people you'd recognize as threats if you ever ran into them in the real world. The show still had one more move left to make, and it's the reason this franchise created the most terrifying villain on television. Because this last one doesn't break into your house or show up at your door with a gun. You already live with him. You've been watching him for 5 full seasons. And the worst part? You've been cheering for him the entire time. Every villain we've covered teaches you a different kind of fear. Tuco shows you what happens when violence has no off switch. Gus shows you what happens when someone builds an entire machine and aims it at you. Lalo shows you that charm and murder can sit right next to each other in the same person without any space between them. And Todd shows you what cruelty looks like when the person doing it can't even tell that it's cruel. But Walter White does something none of those guys can do. He makes you afraid of the person sitting across from you at the dinner table, the person raising your kids, the person you married 20 years ago.
Thought you were the danger.
Walt isn't scary because of what he does to strangers. He's scary because of what he does to the people who trust him the most. The show builds this so slowly that most viewers don't even realize when they lost track of who Walt really is. There's a moment early in season 2 that marks the point of no return, even though it doesn't feel like it at the time. Walt walks into Jesse's apartment while Jesse and Jane are passed out, and while he's trying to shake Jesse awake, he accidentally knocks Jane onto her back. She starts choking. Walt moves toward her like he's going to help, and then he stops. He stands there and watches her die, because Jane was about to take Jesse and the money out of the operation. That's not self-defense or survival or anything close to what Walt tells himself it is. That's a man who's already started weighing people's lives against his business and deciding which ones are worth less. And the truly sick part is that Walt holds on to that information for years, saving it like a weapon, until the worst possible moment to use it arrives.
I watched Jane die.
But before Walt plays that card, he does something that should have made every single viewer stop and ask themselves why they were still rooting for this guy. He poisons a child. During his war with Gus toward the end of season 4, Walt needs Jesse to flip and help him take Gus down. So, Walt poisons Brock, a little kid Jesse cares about, using Lily of the Valley from his own backyard. Then he goes to Jesse and convinces him that Gus is the one who did it. And it works. Jesse believes every word, turns against Gus, and gives Walt the one piece of information that makes everything possible. Gus visits Hector at Casa Tranquila. Walt takes that and goes straight to Hector, and the two of them set up the wheelchair bomb that kills Gus. Walt's entire victory runs on a poisoned child, a lie told to Jesse's face, and a tip Jesse never realized he was giving. And most viewers, even knowing this, still aren't fully ready to call Walt the villain yet. That's how good the show is at keeping you on his side long past the point where you should have left.
I won.
Because Walter White doesn't look like any of the other villains on this list. Tuco screams and hits people. Gus runs a drug empire behind a fried chicken chain. Lalo shows up with a gun and a smile. Todd shoots kids at train tracks. Walt wears khakis and teaches high school chemistry. He has a wife, a teenage son with cerebral palsy, and a baby daughter. He got a cancer diagnosis and started cooking meth so his family would have money after he was gone. That's the story the show hands you in the pilot, and it's the story Walt keeps repeating for 5 seasons, even as the proof keeps stacking up that the real reason stopped being about family a long time ago. By season 5, the list of things Walt has done is completely insane when you lay it all out. He watched Jane die and later used her death as a weapon against Jesse. Then he ran over 2 of Gus's drug dealers with his car and shot the one who survived.
Run.
After that, he sent Jesse to kill Gail Bowditcher, a man who had never hurt anyone, just so Gus couldn't replace Walt in the lab. The Brock poisoning came next, and then he shot Mike with Mike's own gun, only to realize he didn't even need the information he killed Mike to get. And in Breaking Bad Season 5, Episode 8, he hired Jack Welker's gang to kill 10 people across 3 prisons within a 2-minute window just to make sure nobody could talk to the feds. That montage plays out while Walt sits back and waits, and it hits you that the high school teacher from the pilot is now running kill orders like a military commander. And the absolute worst moment comes in Season 5, Episode 14, the episode where everything finally collapses. Jack's gang shows up at the desert where Hank has just arrested Walt, and even though Walt is screaming at them to stand down, Jack kills Hank anyway.
No, he's family.
Say again?
Walt offers Jack everything he has, $80 million buried right there in the ground, and Jack pulls the trigger like the money doesn't mean a thing. After watching his own brother-in-law get murdered, after losing almost everything he spent years building, Walt turns to Jesse and does something that proves exactly what kind of person he's become. He tells Jesse that he watched Jane die, that he was standing right there and could have saved her, but chose not to. And the reason he says it isn't guilt finally catching up with him. It's because Jesse turned on him, and Walt wants the last thing Jesse hears before the gang drags him away to be the single cruelest thing Walt ever kept from him. That's the moment you finally see the full picture of what the show has been building across 5 seasons. Walt isn't the most terrifying villain in this franchise because he's the most violent, because he's obviously not. He's not the most calculated, because Gus beats him there. He's not the most unpredictable, because Tuco and Lalo both have him beat on that. What makes Walt the scariest villain this show ever created is that it spent 5 years hiding him behind the same thing that hides dangerous people in real life. A story that sounds reasonable. I have cancer. My family needs money. I had no choice. Every other villain on this list is someone you'd run from if you could see them clearly. Walt is the one you'd defend. You'd explain away the red flags. You'd tell yourself he's not that bad because you know him, because you watched him cry over his diagnosis, because you saw him tuck his daughter into bed. And that's the trick. The show doesn't just turn Walt into a villain. It turns you into someone who helped him get away with it, because you kept rooting for him long after you should have stopped.
He poisoned Brock and you helped him.
Tuco could never get inside your head like that. Gus could never make you feel guilty for liking him. And Lalo and Todd, for all the fear they bring, could never make you sit there after the credits roll and wonder whether you would have caught the warning sign sooner if Walt hadn't been the main character. Walt pulls that off because the show gave him the one weapon none of these other villains ever had: your trust. Every other villain in Breaking Bad is someone the show asks you to be afraid of. Walter White is the one the show asks you to look in the mirror and realize you should have been afraid of the whole time. And that's how Breaking Bad created the most terrifying villain on television. If you made it this far, you already know you need to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.